I watched a man dissolve into nothing, no scream, no trace, and the town acted like he never existed. That was just the beginning. What if every 7 years, a small American town fed someone to an ancient entity in exchange for peace, power, and prosperity? What if your local mayor wasn't elected but reborn, wearing a new body like a mask? This is not a ghost story. This is ritual horror, buried beneath public records, passed down through an unbroken political bloodline. The town is called Wormstead Hollow, but you won't find it on any map, not anymore. And if you're watching this, you might already be too close. The package arrived without a name, no sender, no return address, just a leather-bound journal soaked in mildew and time, with a single note tucked inside that read, "Someone needs to know." I almost threw it out. But that night, as the wind howled against my apartment windows, I opened it and the words inside changed everything. The journal belonged to Edith Varnell, a historian who vanished from Wormstead Hollow in 1998. She wasn't just researching local folklore, she was documenting a ritual pattern so precise, so terrifying, that I haven't slept since. Her final pages spoke of body possession, government cover-ups, and a town built on blood bargains with something ancient and inhuman. What she wrote wasn't fiction, it was a confession. And by the time I finished reading, I knew what I had to do. I had to go there. I had to see if the curse was real. Every 7 years, someone in Wormstead Hollow vanishes and the town acts like they never existed. No candlelight vigils, no missing posters, not even a whispered prayer. Just silence. That's what first pulled me in, not the story, but the absence of one. 3 weeks ago, a package appeared at my door with no name, no return address, and no explanation. Inside was an aged leather-bound journal, cracked at the spine and swollen from decades of moisture. Tucked between the first pages was a single note, handwritten in shaking ink, "Someone needs to know." The name on the inside cover stopped me cold, Edith Varnell, a local historian who had mysteriously disappeared in 1998. No body was ever recovered. Officially, she left town. Unofficially, she was erased. I wasn't looking for folklore, but as I turned the pages, I realized this wasn't myth. It was ritual horror, woven into the structure of a real town, recorded in census data, death records, and old newspaper clippings. Edith hadn't written fiction. She had mapped a cycle of disappearances going back to 1801, and every path she traced led back to a single name that had ruled the town for generations. Blackwave. I didn't know it then, but opening that journal was the first step towards something I wouldn't be able to close. What if every mayor your town has ever had was the same person, wearing a different face? That was the question Edith Varnell was trying to answer before she vanished. According to her journal, the town of Wormstead Hollow was founded in 1801 by a man named Thaddeus Blackwave, a charismatic figure who left behind a prosperous life in Boston to settle in a mist-drenched valley locals refused to enter. They called it a thin place, where the boundary between worlds was weak, fractured. They warned him. He didn't listen. What Edith uncovered, and what I later verified, was that since its founding, every single mayor of Wormstead Hollow had borne the Blackwave name. No elections, no opposition, just a seamless line of power, uninterrupted for over 220 years. That alone would be unsettling. But Edith found more. She documented a perfect 7-year cycle of disappearances, each one quiet, unexplained, and erased from local memory. No resistance, no investigations, just acceptance. And at the centre of it all was the manor, an ancestral home passed down like a cursed relic. Edith believed the Blackwave family's rule wasn't political, it was supernatural. And the price for their power paid in blood, on schedule. I wasn't supposed to find this journal. And if what it says is true, I was never supposed to leave. After finishing the last entry, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I kept thinking about those names, the ones listed under missing every 7 years. The ones with no photos, no obituaries, no trace. I started cross-referencing Edith's notes with official state records, police logs, census reports. And the deeper I went, the more I realized something terrifying. She was right. The disappearances lined up exactly. The Blackwave lineage was unbroken, and somehow no one outside the town had ever noticed. It wasn't just a mystery, it was an active cover-up. Satellite data showed something else. The town of Wormstead Hollow sits at the exact centre of a perfect geometric formation, 7 peaks surrounding one valley. That kind of symmetry doesn't happen in nature. It happens in ritual, in design. And once I saw the pattern, I couldn't unsee it. I knew I had to go there not out of curiosity, but because if this is real, the story hasn't ended. It's repeating. And the next disappearance was just days away. There's something wrong with Wormstead Hollow, and you feel it the moment you arrive. The air is too still. The streets are too clean. The smiles are too practiced. As I drove through the winding mountain pass, cell signal dropped to 0 and the fog swallowed everything behind me. It was like crossing into a sealed memory, a place that refused to let history escape. I passed the rusted town sign, Wormstead Hollow, founded 1801, and realised that not a single car had passed me for over an hour. No movement, no noise, just that suffocating silence. I had entered a place that wasn't forgotten by time it had removed itself from it. What waited ahead wasn't just a quiet mountain town. It was a perfectly preserved lie. And the people inside were keeping something alive. Something that demanded to be fed. I didn't know yet who would talk, or who would try to silence me. But I knew this. I'd already gone too far to turn back. The town looked too perfect, and that's what made it terrifying. Wormstead Hollow felt like a postcard from a decade that never existed. Victorian buildings lined Main Street with fresh paint and hand-lettered signs, but not a single person walked the sidewalks. The air smelled like old wood and lavender, but beneath it lingered something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. I checked into the Hollow Inn, run by a couple named the Marrows, who smiled just a second too long. When I mentioned Edith Varnell's name, their expressions didn't change, but their eyes did. Something closed behind them. Later that night, I overheard them whispering behind the office door. He's asking about her. Yes, just like the last one. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I wandered into the town square and saw it for the first time the Blackwave statue. Thaddeus Blackwave in stone. Arms outstretched as if welcoming you or warning you. And the eyes, perfectly carved, unblinking, painted that same unnatural grey. Everyone who passed it avoided looking up. That was when I realised the people here weren't just hiding something. They were surviving something. and they all knew it was about to wake again. Everyone in Wormstead Hollow looked like they were playing a role, and I was the only one who didn't know the script. At the local cafe, the hollow grind. The barista greeted me by name before I said a word. I froze. I had never been here before. I asked how she knew who I was, and she laughed it off with a casual, "We don't get many strangers." But it wasn't the kind of laugh that reached the eyes. I ordered coffee just to stay longer, hoping to hear more. The girl behind the counter was friendly, too friendly. I watched her hands shake when she dropped a spoon. I watched how the cook in the back never made eye contact with me once. There was a bulletin board near the exit, filled with flyers for events that had already passed some dated years ago. No one had taken them down. Outside, the fog still clung to the trees like a warning. It wasn't just eerie, it felt intentional, like the town had staged its own stillness. I looked around and realised something bone-deep, unsettling Wormstead Hollow wasn't unaware of me. It was waiting for me, and I had no idea what came next. I met the first person who seemed willing to speak, but only when no one was watching. His name was Alban Mercer, a retired surveyor who'd lived in Wormstead Hollow for over 70 years. I found him sitting alone in the town library, hunched over a local map that looked older than the building itself. When I mentioned Edith Varnell, he didn't flinch. He just gestured to the empty chair beside him and said, "She was right, but she didn't know how right." We spoke in hushed tones between the creaking aisles of books that smelled of dust and varnish. He told me the disappearances were real, not stories he'd seen it happen. His own sister vanished in 1953, 3 days before the election. His father had tried to run against Mayor Conrad Blackwave. After the girl was gone, he dropped out. No one ever brought it up again. Alban said it wasn't just about politics. It was about control, about preserving something ancient that didn't belong in our world. They don't kill people, he said. They take them. One soul to feed the structure. One body to wear the name. And the worst part, they were preparing to do it again. Very soon. By the time I realized I was being followed, it was already too late. I left the library just before dusk, but the moment I stepped outside, I felt it eyes that didn't blink. Footsteps that stopped when I turned. A black sedan idled across the street, engine humming low. Same car I'd seen earlier near the inn, and again outside the cafe. I ducked into a side alley, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But when I cut through the back streets and looked over my shoulder, the car was there, always one turn behind. Wormstead Hollow was no longer just watching. It was responding. I returned to the inn only to find my room had been emptied. My notes, my recorder, even Edith's journal all gone. The innkeepers claimed they never saw them. Their smiles were wider now. Too wide. It hit me in that moment I wasn't investigating the town anymore. I was being hunted by it. My phone had no service. GPS couldn't find my location. The streets were growing darker, quieter. Like the town itself was closing in. And I had no one left to call, no way out. And the date on the town's calendar, April 17th, circled in red. The closer I got to the truth, the more the town began to glitch, like reality itself was unraveling. I walked past a window and saw myself inside, standing completely still, staring back. But I hadn't stopped walking. I passed the same house twice, same lights on. Same dog in the yard. Same man watering a plant that wasn't real. I turned back, retraced my steps, and the street had changed. A shop that had been boarded up since I arrived was now open, lit with candles, filled with people speaking in hushed voices in a language I couldn't place. One of them looked up, and I swear it was Edith Varnell. Older, paler. Her lips didn't move, but I heard a voice in my head. You're not supposed to see this. When I blinked, the shop was dark again. Empty. Every direction I turned, the town warped itself to trap me a loop that bent space like a dying memory. I wasn't sure what was real anymore. I wasn't even sure if I was real. I realized then Wormstead Hollow didn't need to kill me. It just needed me to forget who I was. And that was already working. I broke into the town hall that night not out of courage, but desperation. The door was already unlocked, almost like it had been waiting for me. Inside, the walls were lined with portraits of every mayor since 1801, but the same face appeared again and again, aged differently each time, always with the same crooked smile. In the archives, I found sealed files stamped in red Varnell, Edith discontinued, and behind a locked cabinet, a folder labelled Inheritors. My name was on the list, not handwritten, printed, as if I'd already been chosen for something. I flipped through the pages, photos of strangers who looked eerily like me, spanning generations, all ending in the same word, absorbed. A low hum filled the room, like the building was breathing. Suddenly the lights cut out. I heard footsteps slow, deliberate, not one person, many, moving in sync. I crawled into a crawl space beneath the floorboards just as the doors creaked open. From the slats, I saw their feet bare, pale, twitching unnaturally. They weren't alive, or if they were, they'd given up something vital, something I wasn't ready to lose. Not yet. There's a reason no one ever leaves Wormstead Hollow, and it's not because they don't want to. It's because once you learn what the town really is, you become part of it, a vessel, a keeper, a warning. Everything I'd uncovered, the missing people, the flickering memories, the face that never aged, wasn't the result of corruption or madness. It was something far older, a ritual encoded into the very land, passed down like a disease dressed as tradition. And I was next in line. But before the town could claim me completely, something or someone broke the loop. Or so I thought. What happened next wasn't survival. It was inheritance. The truth didn't come with thunder or blood, it came with a photograph. In the town hall's back archives, beneath layers of dust and rot, I found a faded black and white image, children standing in front of the bell tower, smiling. One of them was Edith Varnell, another my mother. Same face, same scar on the jawline. But the date on the photo, 1903. That wasn't possible. My mother was born in 1971, beneath the photo, in red ink, line 6, complete. Inheritance secure. My fingers trembled as I realized the terrifying pattern every 33 years. A new generation was absorbed. But absorbed into what I turned the page and saw it a diagram of the human brain beside a map of the town. They were identical. Every street, every alley, every building mirrored neural pathways. Wormstead Hollow wasn't a place. It was a consciousness, a sentient system feeding on memory, identity, bloodlines, and I'd already been living inside it. Not just trapped by the town, I was a part of its mind. I thought I was unraveling a conspiracy, but the conspiracy was unraveling me. I started losing time. Whole hours vanished. I'd wake up in places I hadn't walked to, with dirt under my nails and blood that wasn't mine. My voice recorder captured audio I never remembered saying ritual chants. Names I'd never heard before, but somehow knew how to pronounce. And a phrase repeated over and over the vessel, must forget to become. Then I found the mirror. Not a normal one. This one was bolted into the floor of the old mayor's residence. Its surface warped like liquid. When I looked into it, my reflection didn't match me. It was smiling. I wasn't. The room around me rippled, and for a second I saw through the eyes of someone else, an old man, blind in one eye, laughing as flames consumed a barn. That same barn where I once hid as a child during a storm. Wormstead wasn't rewriting history. It was recycling identity. We weren't descendants, we were reboots. And the more I resisted, the more the town rewrote me. They never wanted to trap me. They wanted to replace me. I wasn't the first to dig, to question, to feel the pull of something ancient humming beneath the town. Every 33 years, one of us awakens, and every time, the hollow silences them. Not with violence, but with assimilation. I found a ledger buried beneath the chapel floorboards, wrapped in wax cloth. Its pages listed names, dozens of them all marked completed. Next to mine, a blank space. The final entry read, Stage 5 cognitive overwrite in progress. That night, I couldn't remember my own birthday. The next morning, I called my sister by the wrong name, and I didn't notice until she cried. My thoughts felt like they weren't mine anymore, like I was performing memory instead of living it. Then I found an old cassette labelled You Before. I played it, the voice. It was mine, but younger, terrified, begging someone me not to let them in. That's when I realised the person I used to be had already tried to stop this, and failed. This wasn't a haunting. It was a full neurological overwrite ritualised possession through memory erosion. And I was running out of self. There was no curse on Wormstead. Wormstead itself was the curse. The town wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by itself. A self-consuming loop that fed on identity, memory, and belief. I discovered the map etched onto the ceiling of the old post office at first glance. It was just stars. But when connected in a certain sequence, they formed a glyph, a sigil of recursion, looping endlessly inward. Every building, every street, every grave had been laid out to mirror this shape. The entire town was a ritual structure, and the townspeople. They weren't victims. They were architects, participants, willing vessels. I found recordings of town meetings, some dated over a century ago, with clear video footage, colour, and me sitting in the crowd, asking questions I hadn't yet thought to ask. Time wasn't moving forward here. It was folding inward. And the more I tried to document it, the more reality rejected my efforts. Files erased themselves. Ink vanished from notebooks. My own handwriting twisted into ancient runes. This wasn't a place built to remember, it was built to erase. And I had already stepped too deep into the loop to leave whole. I wasn't just being watched. I was being rewritten. Every time I fell asleep, I'd wake up with a different scar, a new habit, a memory I couldn't place but somehow missed. One morning, I found an old photograph nailed to my door. It showed the town square during a festival, dated 1892. Everyone was smiling, frozen mid-celebration. But there, in the back, blurry but unmistakable, was me. Same face, same jacket, same scar on my hand. I hadn't just entered Wormstead. I had always been here. The town didn't trap outsiders. It manufactured them, spun them from leftover thoughts, stitched them from the grief of others, and looped them into its myth. The deeper I dug, the more the town rewarded me with truths designed to collapse my identity. Names twisted, faces blurred. At one point, I screamed at my own reflection, and the mirror didn't mimic me, it hesitated, then smiled. Wormstead wasn't cursed by something evil. It was engineered by minds who believed that truth was the ultimate infection. And I had been infected. No one ever truly leaves Wormstead. You either forget it existed, or worse, you remember it wrong. Survivors talk in riddles, sketch symbols in their sleep, and wake up whispering names that don't belong to anyone alive. The town doesn't kill you. It overwrites you. And the final chapter isn't about escape. It's about recognition, about understanding what you've become in the process. But before I could run, before I could even choose, the town whispered its final demand, and what it asked changed everything. Because some truths aren't meant to be remembered, but passed on. Even after I escaped Wormstead, or thought I did, the town lingered in the corners of my reality like mildew under wallpaper. I'd see crooked chimneys in places they shouldn't be. Hear that bell toll at 3:17 a.m, even with no tower nearby. My voice sometimes slips into dialects I never learned, murmuring hymns no one recognizes. And worse, mirrors don't reflect me properly anymore. They lag. They study. I tried therapy. I tried medication. But nothing worked. Because how do you medicate a memory that isn't yours but lives inside you like a parasite? The worst part isn't the fear. It's the familiarity. The realization that part of me misses it. That Wormstead didn't just haunt me, it rewrote me line by line. That's the true curse, not what I survived, but what I became afterward. And there are others like me, scattered, ticking, waiting for the bell to call us back. I thought moving across the country would help. New city, new job, new name. But Wormstead follows like a second shadow. Every time I pass a church, I brace for the sound of that bell. I avoid antique stores, afraid I'll see her porcelain face grinning through the glass. Sometimes, when I sleep, I wake up with my hands folded in prayer, except it's not my voice I hear in the dark, but a dozen whispers overlapping, chanting the same broken scripture. I started keeping journals to track what's real, but the entries change overnight. Ink bleeds backwards. Dates vanish. Wormstead didn't just leave a mark, it made edits. My mind isn't a diary anymore. It's a palimpsest, overwritten by something older, something colder. I used to believe trauma fades, but this isn't trauma. It's inheritance. A curse disguised as memory. And some nights, I catch myself longing for the fog, for the distant clang of the bell, for that strange feeling of belonging like Wormstead still owns, a part of me I'll never get back. I tried to burn everything. The journal, the map, even the shoes I wore that night. But fire doesn't cleanse Wormstead. It spreads it. I watched the flames curl around the bell tower sketch, and just before the page turned to ash, the bell rang. Not from the paper, but from somewhere nearby. I live 5 states away. There are no towers near me, but I swear on my own sanity, I heard the clang. Since then, the air feels heavier, like I'm breathing through fog no one else can see. Strangers recognize me. Old women nod, like they've been expecting me. And last night, someone slipped a note under my door. No envelope, just a torn hymnal page. It read, "You rang it. Now listen. There's something about that bell, it doesn't summon something from the outside. It activates what's already inside you. The guilt, the questions, the cracks in your logic. Wormstead isn't done with me, and I'm starting to believe. It never really started, either. It's just continuing, quietly. In echoes, I haven't slept properly in weeks. Not since I started dreaming in Latin, verses I never learned, and waking up with my ears ringing always 3 tones. Low to high. It's the same chime the Vexleys documented in 1812, the one that came right before the fire, the one survivors claimed they heard hours before it ever rang. I tried telling a therapist. He listened, nodded, and then excused himself. The next day, his office was empty. Shut down overnight. No record of his practice. My search history erases itself now. GPS glitches near graveyards. My reflection in car windows lags. Just for a second, but enough. Every time I pass a bell tower, even decorative ones, I flinch. Because I know the resonance is waiting for me to let my guard down. This isn't just a haunting, it's an infection. A ritual that replicates through awareness. The more you understand, the more it spreads. I tried silence. I tried forgetting. But truth has its own frequency, and once you've heard it, you can't unhear it. I moved 3 states away. Changed my name. Threw out every clock, mirror, and wind chime in the house. But some nights, usually around 3:17 a.m., I still hear it, the faint echo of the bell. So distant it might be imagination, or a warning. My daughter once drew a picture of a tower with no doors, just shadows looking out. She said, "It's where the sound lives now." I don't let her watch TV. I don't let her near the attic. But somehow she knows. They always do. The Vexleys were erased from records. Yet their presence spreads like mould through history, hidden in archived blueprints, whispered in nursery rhymes, encoded in architectural symbols that no one really designed. My hands shake when I pass certain buildings. Not because they're haunted, but because they're listening. The real curse isn't what happened in that tower. It's how it waits. Dormant. Embedded in sound waves and memory. The toll was never meant to end with them. It continues in us. And if you've made it this far, if you've listened too closely, it may already be inside you. Maybe the scariest part isn't the curse itself, but the silence that follows it. The questions no one dares ask. The history no one writes down. The feeling that something ancient is watching and waiting. If stories like this disturb you, it's because they're meant to. Not to traumatize, but to remind. That trauma lives not just in people, but in places, in sounds, in the gaps between what we see and what we believe. And maybe, just maybe, you've heard a bell like that too. If you have, or if this story echoed something buried deep in your past, share it below. We read every comment. Save this video to revisit the clues. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And remember, not all echoes fade. Some wait for you to answer.